So here we go, back again, new video, new board, the Starboard Gen R with me, Tony, from thesupco.com. So new board from Starboard, and it's funny. I'll tell you why it's funny. It's funny because there's almost this collective intake of breath when you hear there's a new board from Starboard, because you end up thinking, what now? Because there are so many boards in the Starboard lineup. If you take every board in every construction, the number of boards is vast. Now, while there are different needs in different markets around the world, and yeah, there's definitely a case for different models, to hear that there's another race board coming just makes you go, okay, what's coming? Because, and if you look at it historically, we've always had 3 boards in Starboard's race range, and that has been the Ace, which is a very dedicated downwind board. Then you've got the All-Star, arguably the most successful race board of all time, and then the Sprint, which is the flat water dedicated board. Now, as those 3 models go, particularly within the UK, and I would say probably for the rest of the world, what tends to happen is very few Aces tend to be made and sold. Downwinding, yeah, it's a growing market for sure, but it's one that's very specialist, and then you find with the Ace, it is a very dedicated board, particularly now. Now, the All-Star has always been that one all-water kind of quiver dominating board that is the go-to for a lot of people, and it has been for a long, long period of time. The Sprint now is a very, very flat water dedicated board. It's been flat water dedicated its entire life, but now it's really aggressively so, to the point of that, yeah, it is so flat water endurance dedicated as a model that between the Sprint and the All-Star having gone even more all water, to the point where it's kind of burgeoning on Ace territory while also remaining very quick in the flat, is kind of created this gap in the middle. And this gap, this kind of almost need for a hybrid type board, well, that is the reason why the Gen R exists. Where the Gen R fits as a model is it's kind of overtaken, if you like, where we've always had the All-Star kind of fit in a more of a technical racing type board. And I think one of the areas where in which that's really come quite prevalent is as the All-Star has gone dugout, and rightly so, a very deep dugout, similar to that as the Ace, there's been this growing need, and we've seen it in some other brands, this growing need and this popularity, once more, for flat-decked boards. Flat-deck race boards, particularly when technical racing, for us in the UK, surf, kind of, yeah, we get surf, but most of our racing tends to be split between a bit of technical and some inland flat water stuff. To have a dugout board, while it lowers your centre of gravity and provides a lot of stability, to have a flat deck and to move around it very quickly, very intuitively, because you're not dealing with a slope coming up towards the tail of the board, is quite a nice thing. So that's why the Gen R exists, because I was certainly scratching my head and a little bit tense when I heard that there was another board coming from Starboard. But it's Starboard, so what are you going to do? Starboard, by no means, are the most successful race board manufacturer in the world. So yeah, if they find there's a need, and there's a need from not just, I would say, the market at large, but also their team, and you've got to say they've got the most successful race team as well, in what they refer to as the dream team of all time, then yeah, that kind of funnel feeding back in to their development programs and their boards that result from that, then yeah, those guys and girls certainly know their stuff. So look, let's run you through the board down from the nose down to the tail as we do in all of our videos here at the Sup Company. And it is, well, before we get to the nose, let's take the rocker line of this board. And the rocker line of this board is actually quite flat. There is a small amount of pronounced rocker in the nose, but nowhere near what we see in the All-Star. There's certainly, it's not as flat rocker as a sprint because it's not an out and out dedicated flat water board, but it is one that performs. As we then go back down to the nose, you then start to see those features really kind of married between the extremes that we have in the sprint and the really popular long-lasting features that we see within the All-Star kind of merged, and they've merged and resulted in what is a relatively low volume nose, one that gives the board this feeling of being really manageable. And I think that's probably one of the overriding things of the Gen R, is just how easy it is to use. I think for a lot of people, particularly with the All-Star shape being this double concave, and then the sprint now with this very narrow nose, they are at their extremes. And again, that's where the Gen R kind of drops perfectly in the middle, in that it's very, very easy to use. You get on this board and it's like, okay, I get it. And literally you can access all of its performance straight out the gate. There's this really nice video that Michael Booth's going to put up online as well of him out on his first run on a Gen R, and he filmed it. And he's basically come back in glowing because the board is that good. It's that easy to use. And that is down, I think, in large part to its volume and its rocker line and how that volume is distributed throughout the nose. As a board, as well, as we work our way back down it, it's thinner. It's much, much thinner in terms of board thickness than we have in an All-Star and a sprint. And that's because it's a flat deck. You don't need that thickness that you find in those two other boards, All-Star and Sprint, that are both dedicated dugouts, that you have with this flat deck. It is a slightly recessed deck, and we'll come onto the deck now. It is a slightly recessed deck, but it's one that drains very, very quickly, and there's a big hole with a venturi on the bottom of the board, and the water clears really, really easily off the deck. But it is just, it's comfortable. You feel at home. You don't feel in it as such. You don't really feel on it, if that makes sense. But you do feel secure in terms of your foot placement throughout the board. As you work down though, this deck pad, it's a new deck pad from Starboard. It's kind of like this ribbed almost, ribbed for pleasure deck pad with a little bit of a crocodile skin texture to it cut in. It's really attractive, looks really good, feels really comfortable on the foot. And actually I can imagine standing on this for a long period of time without issue. Often I find personally, and I think a few other paddlers out there as well, find a deep diamond cut deck pad a little bit kind of niggly on the base of your feet after a while if paddling over a long distance time. But yeah, this isn't going to be an issue at all. As you work your way back down the board though, footwork wise, yeah, it's really intuitive because you're not having to almost learn how the board works in terms of this uphill journey that you find with a true dugout. It just, yeah, you put your foot down, it's going to hit the board, and when it hits the board, there's heaps and heaps of stability. And that, for me, is, again, on this board, is a real big standout feature, is because it's a relatively flat underside to the board, but then with a nice, solid, defined rail shape, and it carries its width quite far aft. Stability is absolutely fine. You can walk your way up and down this board without issue, and that's regardless of the widths that it's in. And you've kind of got to factor in that this is available in a 21.5, a 23, a 25, which I think is going to be the most popular size, 27, and a 29. And I think the 29 particularly as well is really going to have big appeal for people that are looking for a fast, kind of almost a GT-esque touring board. And yeah, certainly in those wider widths, maybe the 27 to some extent as well. But yeah, you walk your way all the way down to the back of the board. Really big, the tallest kick pad we've ever seen on a race board on the back there. And I think that really alludes to just how well this board works in surf and small waves. Riding bumps on this board, again, really intuitive, and that performance and glide, really, really easy to access. But look, let's take the board and roll it up onto its rails so you can see the underside on it. And when we first unpacked it, well, I think the most striking thing on the board was, well, what about the bottom shape? And I guess it's because we're so used to seeing the extremes that we've now got. Well, historically, a really deep single concave on the All-Star. It then moved and transitioned to this double concave that we have now, which has left this kind of like slightly tippy but quick feel to the board. And then you've got the Sprint, which is as extreme as it is with its very rounded rails and very knife-like nose. Well, once you roll this over and you look at it, you think, okay, but it's for good reason, because when you've got effectively a hull shape like this, it's very, very intuitive. It's extremely predictable. And I think that with that, that builds confidence very, very quickly. It makes it very, well, easy to use. And I think the easier something is to use, one, you're more likely to use it more often, but two, you're able just to have that instant confidence in it that it's gonna be there underneath you and it's gonna perform. So yeah, as you work your way back down the board, there is a slight pronounced feature to the nose in where that if you are paddling in flat water and you want to engage the nose and that rocker line, you can do that on this board. But as it flows back down, no real great surprises, nice rounded rail, and it's not anywhere near as rounded, almost icebreaker-like that you have on the Sprint, but it is a defined rail. There is a slight chine to it, but nothing too pronounced. So again, it's making it predictable in terms of that secondary stability. And it flows all the way down towards the fin box. Now the fin box on this board actually is a 10-inch fin box. The reason why Starboard have done that is because fin placement makes a big difference to overall performance on the board. The type of fin that you run on the board also makes a big difference, but the further forward set you have your fin, the more maneuverable the board is going to be. The further aft you have the fin set, the better tracking it's going to yield. So that longer fin box is going to allow you to basically tune your fin placement to the conditions that you've got. So if you are flat water predominantly racing this board and it will work in the flat for you, then yeah, you're going to set it to the aft. If you're going to be in surf a little bit more technical in terms of the course and you want additional maneuverability from the board underneath you, then you set it further forwards. Somewhere between the two, well, you set it somewhere between the two, somewhere down the middle. So yeah, the rocker line though starts to actually kick up slightly in the back end of the board. So again, when surfing or running around in small waves and bumps, that's going to allow you basically just to lift the nose slightly. There's a couple of really good videos and good images of Daniel from the Starboard Dream Team making this board look fantastic in the surf. But yeah, the reason for that, to keep that nose clear and create that little bit extra lift and clearance in the nose, is that additional little bit of rocker that they've placed in the tail on this board. So look, there you have it. I mean, the Gen R, it is really a fantastic hybrid board. It's something that, well, only after the feedback and only after, you know, rider feedback and true, genuine rider feedback, I think that Starboard, it's kind of dawned on them that there is a need, the way in which they've taken this race board range now and build it out to 4 boards, that this does fill a gap, and that one quiver almost board that everyday paddlers need. And I think that, you know, if someone was in fortunate enough position to go off and have a very dedicated flat water board, then yeah, you'd have a Sprint. If you're also then racing, you know, technical surf, bit more all water, then yeah, you'd have an all-star as well, but that's not everyone by any stretch. And I think that if you are now out there looking for principally a fast, easy to use, all-water board, then yeah, the Gen R is definitely within that category and is something that should absolutely be on your shortlist. It's here for demo, give us a shout. Thanks for watching our video. If you've got any questions about what you've seen, why not give us a call in the shop or head over to thesupco.com. To stay up to date though with all of our videos, well, make sure you subscribe up here and hit the notification bell. But to see our next video, well, take a look up here.